For 20 long years. I smoked lots of reefer, drank lots of beer. Every day at 420, we're going to settle the score. And for 20 long years, it's been 20 past 4.
Hey, everybody. Welcome. 420 Live. I'm Jeff Kravitz. I'm your host for another adventure, week 53. We are firing up our second year here at 420 Live. We're happy to be with you. This has been an ongoing discussion that we've been having since pandemic began. I hate to start off my Friday and Monday show with bad news, but another shooting today in Colorado. And, I guess that's a sign we're getting back to normal when people go out there. This is unbelievable to me that this is how people express themselves with guns. And the terrorists are all white. They're all Americans, and they're all living right next door to you. So be careful. Make sure you check out your neighbors. And my hearts and thoughts go out to everybody there in Boulder, one of our favorite cities in America. We have a lot of good friends there. So everybody in Denver and Boulder and Colorado, please take care of yourselves today and everywhere. You got to keep an eye out. It's kind of crazy what's going on out there in our country right now as we start to open back up and get back at it. If you've been seeing the pictures from this weekend down in Miami, unbelievable what's happening down there. They're on curfew lockdown. We were there last week, and it wasn't quite this bad. It wasn't quite, riotous. It was fun. There was still a good energy going on, but the energy in Miami is turning to crap. Basically, in most of America, it's turned to crap. But, there's silver linings. I'm seeing silver linings everywhere as the amount of vaccinations. The AstraZeneca got approved today. So a fourth vaccine that we have that you're going to be able to elect to get a shot. So let's all get vaccinated. Let's get on the plan. Let's get ready to rumble and get back to business as usual, hopefully this summer. I mean, bands are announcing today. J-Rad announced 3 shows in Westville, Connecticut. Our friends Goose, our friends of Sewanee seem to be, Michael Berg and the folks down there seem to be announcing a different concert. Every time I turn around, it's another 2 or 3 day festival down there. We're coming back online where people like Coachella are pushing and Stagecoach are pushing to 2022. We have our good friends at Another Planet that have already sold out Life is Beautiful for the 3rd week in September. And they've also sold out today, 3-day passes for Outside Lands has sold out. In the past, if I've sorted you out for Outside Lands, this year, you're on your own. So get on it, get your single-day passes, get all situated because the comps are gone, folks. The free ride's over. It's going to be time for everybody to step up and pay up when the music comes back online. These people have been off the road for way too long. It's going to be time to put some money back in pockets and put our artists back on the road and hopefully safely. I mean, we want to be safe. We want to err on the side of safety. This has been an unbelievable year. Energy zapping. I don't even know where I find the energy to come live with you guys anymore. But you know what? I'm still here. I'm not officially working yet. I have a lot of things lined up, but who knows what's going to come up and what's not going to come up. It's been, I feel like I'm a juggling. But meanwhile, we have a big week for you here on 420 Live. Today, my good friend Jonathan McHugh, he is the director of Long Live Rock, brand new documentary out. I think it's been out 2 weeks now. And I was lucky enough to see an original cut of it in the theater over at CAA before, I guess that was a year ago. We'll get to John in a second. Tomorrow, we're going to have our good friend Quentin Schaefer. Quentin ran HBO publicity for 40 years. He has a new adult novel out about this guitar playing. It's a whole guitar thing. I'm just into reading it right now. Excited for Quentin. On Wednesday, my good friend Angus Thomas, who's been down in Miami covering this whole craziness. And on Thursday, we have E.G. Eats. Eric Goldschmidt's going to be on to entertain us and talk about food in Los Angeles. But today, our special guest is the one and only Jonathan McHugh. John and I, when I first moved here to California, and I started working with my good friend John Scott over at TJ Martell Foundation, the one name I kept hearing over and over again was the name John McHugh. Well, John McHugh is going to help do this, and John McHugh is going to help do that. John was very active with the TJ Martell Foundation, a lot of charitable organizations all over Hollywood. John's been an A&R guy. He is now the director of a new movie called Long Live Rock, and I could see him there busy on the phone, and I'll wait till I get a little sign from him that we're ready to go. But Long Live Rock is a brand new documentary that's out now. But you know what? While John is finishing up his call, I will show the trailer. How about that? Share screen. I'm getting very good at this thing here. There we go. Share video, share audio. Let's check out Long Live Rock trailer.
Generally speaking, rock is dead.
I don't listen to anybody who says rock is dead.
All the disenfranchised feel that they belong to something that's much bigger.
I don't know what compels people to want to jump on top of other people.
She just said, I want to serve you. I have to pull her up on top of me.
You can kill me right now!
It was definitely my mom trip, my therapy.
There's nothing more mesmerizing than a mosh pit.
It's altering, and in an altered state, people do things that they wouldn't otherwise do.
I see a lady in a wheelchair crowd surfing, that's rock and roll!
Myself and the music I'm making, the art is one of the most important relationships in my life. It's a real connection that's more than like, we're going to go play a show, there's an ocean of people, there's a check at the end of the day. Like, don't tell anybody, but I do this for free.
Yeah, there you go. Long live rock. Ladies and gentlemen, meet my good friend, Jonathan McHugh. Hi, John. Oh, take yourself off mute.
There you go.
Thank you.
What's up, big man? How you doing?
I'm doing, I'm here. I'm in LA. I'm waiting for everything to end, the pandemic to end. Congratulations on the movie. How you feeling?
How am I feeling? I feel, to get something like this done is you realize how much work it really is, and then to get it out there marketing in the world is that much harder. But we have a great team with this company Brahmarama that picked up the movie and putting it out kind of on a DIY level first to get it all through the bands, radio stations that are participant, virtual cinemas. So it's up. You can get it through longliverockmovie.com, and you can rent it through that site before we go to the streamers, to Amazon, to iTunes. We're taking a different approach to get to the people.
Yeah, well, that's the latest thing now, is trying to maximize that pandemic audience that's just looking and dying for new entertainment. I was reminded today that a year ago, we all started watching Tiger King.
Tiger King, right? That shit was crazy.
It was crazy, but it was something that we all locked onto really early in the pandemic, because we were all looking for something to connect with. And that was the first major TV event that we had where everybody started talking, you got to see Tiger King, you got to see Tiger King. So you're hitting it. When I saw it in the theater. I saw it at CAA that day. When was that? Was that have been last February?
That would have been, no. The last February screening was at the Grammy Museum. So that was the last screening ever of the film. That was the Grammy Museum. CAA would have been probably January of 2020. And that was the second to last screening.
So at that point, you were looking for distribution and trying to do it theatrically and trying to do.
We actually had a one night, again, movies like this, they're not going to stay in theaters forever, but we had a one night theatrical campaign lined up through a very solid international company, playing screeners all over the world. And we've been talking to that company for like a year and a half. So we were planning to do that. And then all of a sudden, the pandemic never got better. It just kept getting worse. So at that point, we were approached by this solid company called the Brahmarama that my friend Evan Saxon works at. And it was like, okay, well, we're doing it, but we're virtual. It's all virtual. And so Gary Spivak, who's my producing partner on it, and I discussed like, well, do we sit on this for another year? Like, we already shot 3 years ago. The band's already had 2 albums since that time. Or do we just get it out and make it like on the 1 year anniversary of the pandemic, put it out there and give people a treat to say, hey, we know you can't go to festivals right now, but we have this for you to tide you over. So that's what we did. We put it out last Friday.
Well, one of the questions you asked at the beginning there is rock and roll dead? That's something Gene Simmons was famous for spouting, which is pretty funny since he's making a ton of money playing rock and roll. But I think rock and roll is going to come back stronger than ever. What's your opinion?
Well, again, the premise of this one is basically that because this music is harder edge, and because the crowd that loves it is off-putting to some people, as far as tattoos, piercings, long hair, headbanging as a form of listening to your music. It's very outward. It's very in your face. It's very aggressive, and it's not mainstream. So the whole premise is that, this music is not mainstream. Whereas when we were growing up, Jeff, bands like Led Zeppelin and The Who and the Stones and Black Sabbath, they were on the edge of mainstream because rock radio was a prominent form of music, whereas a lot of that has gone away. You're either like classic rock or you're alternative rock. The whole rock spectrum is, or you're active rock. Like I said, you're active rock, which is just this music, this hard edge music. So because Gary runs a number of these festivals, and we had amazing locations, he was able to deliver the top shelf talent in the game. We focused on those festivals and that music, whereas the cool kids go to Coachella or Bonnaroo, Outside Lands. The rock people go to Aftershock, Carolina Rebellion, Sonic Temple. It's just same concept, just different music, different bands. So we focused on that because the fandom for me, like if you ever go to those shows, Jeff, and the mosh pits, the crowd surfing, the wall of death, these things that break out, these tribal nature of things that break out of these festivals is like you've never seen it before. Like when I went to that first festival in Columbus, watching the dance of these masses of crowd surfers and how security has to carry them out, and it's this whole ballet that goes on between the fans and the security. Is like, what is that? It's just a different level of shit, really.
Yeah, well, I've seen a lot of it. I mean, most of the festivals I shoot aren't heavy metal, but I've shot Metallica, of course, many times, and I've been there for their tours. I remember going to Guns N' Roses, opened for Metallica, I believe, at the Rose Bowl in the 80s. I'm sure you were at that show. I mean, everybody in LA was at that show because Guns N' Roses at the time was the hottest thing on the planet, and so was Metallica. And I remember looking at the kids next to me headbanging, and then I was trying to do it too, and I lasted like 4 times, and I'm like, what the hell? How do they do that?
Give me the Advil, bro. Give me the Advil.
Jeez, and I wasn't even as old as I am at that point.
Right. Yeah, no, it's different. It's a hard edge crowd, and they love it, but part of the thing about the movie is, they're just like me and you, man. They're regular people. They just happen to like a harder edge of music. It's like people who like beer versus whiskey. They just like it a little bit harder.
Yeah, they like it turned up all the way, which I don't have any problem with. I like it loud. I mean, I've had my time with the heavy stuff, but I'm trying to lighten up in my old age.
Like still bands like, for me, Metallica, and Rage Against the Machine. Like Rage Against the Machine is one of my favorite all-time bands. Like they're just that fucking good. That energy I felt at their shows, and I was lucky because I got to see, because my friend's married to Tom Morello, and she would like call me up and go, 8:00, Roxy, back door, warm-up show, click, and I'd be like, okay. And so I got to see some of those things, and that's like some of the greatest energy shows of all time for me. And that's super hard, that stuff, and edgy, but there's something about it that you can't bottle that energy, man. That live fucking Rage Against the Machine energy, or Metallica in a small venue. It's just kind of
it's interesting. Both those bands you mentioned were huge K-Rock bands. I mean, and I remember when Metallica actually went to K-Rock and talked to Kevin and was like, "We're an alternative band," and K-Rock was like, "No, you're a heavy metal band." And Metallica ended up winning that argument, and they were added to the playlist to K-Rock, which was really strange, I thought, at the time. Did you think that's in the same wheelhouse? Because they do in Rages.
Yeah, the whole subjective nature of what is music classified as, right? When I was working at Elektra, Enter Sandman came out, and it was a #1 rock radio record. But the guys who ran Elektra were like, look, you got to cross that record to top 40. It's that big a record. And the challenge of trying to get that record played on top 40 radio was immense, because even if station programmers were like the record and willing to take a chance, Metallica had such a stigma in 1992, that they wouldn't play the record based on that. And a lot of people we had to get to send them white labels. We basically do up a vinyl with no name on it. And they would just put it on. They'd give it to their night jock at night and just put it on. And they wouldn't be able to back announce what it was, because they were worried about advertisers pulling out because they were playing the band Metallica. That's how fucking crazy it was.
Well,
So,
it was a different era, though, right?
that's 20 years ago. But to answer the question about what is Metallica, I mean, they are a hard rock band. They are the kings of that genre. And, you know, a band like that has to maintain true to their form. Like, they could never do a duet with Taylor Swift, right? No matter how much they may want to, or they have some fun with it. They just couldn't do it because the aesthetic is such that they're in a lane, and that lane has to stay there, because if fans feel you've sold out in that world, you're done with your core. And that's the thing about that business. It's about the core, right? Pop music, as we see it, rappers, there's no sellout factor. They just, all of a sudden they're doing ads for this and ads for that. In the old days, like, bands would never do ads. Rock bands would never do ads. I mean, Led Zeppelin would never even make videos. You never even knew what they looked like, kind of. You know, the mystique is all gone. It's all blown out. But at least in the hard rock culture, what I liked about it is they kind of maintain this interesting purity to it. And that's something to be said. And so, is rock dead? Well, it's certainly not mainstream in that respect. But, and will it ever cross over to mainstream? That depends if you make the right ballad at the right time to get into pop or playlists like that, you know?
Well, it's funny, in the 80s, every band that was a heavy metal band, Rat and Poison, they all had the power ballad. Like, the power ballad was a thing.
Yeah. And that's what, you know, a band like Extreme that I worked with, you know, they had this song More Than Words, but that was an anomaly for their act. Like, you know, most of those other bands you mentioned, but they all came up. The record companies probably made them write that power ballad that got them that mainstream, because MTV at the time was so dominant, but they were never going to play too hard a record. But if you gave them More Than Words or whatever those other, you know, power ballads were by all those bands you mentioned, the Sunset Strip bands, then they'll play them. And that's what got them their mainstream moment in time. And that was really MTV, a lot of that.
Yeah, MTV definitely changed it. But you were involved even before MTV, because I remember when I came here in the mid 80s, you were already at Electric, if I remember correctly. And back in those days, you would just get a record, and then you had all the relations with the radio promo guys, and your job was to get it played as many places as possible.
Yeah. Yeah. I mean, you know, the art of radio promotion was just getting records played. It was, you know, it was great days back then, because you know, it was fun. Radio promotion was fun. And then as you got older, it got more chain oriented, and the radio stations became less able to make moves that had been making on chain wide ads. And I got out of that game and started producing soundtracks. And that got me into music supervising, which got me into producing, which then got me into directing. So, you know, all those moves I made luckily turned out to be the best, because you know, much like you've been blessed to do this. Like, you picked up a camera, you started shooting people, and like, who knew it was going to become this great business for you. But you were able to do something you loved, and that's the beauty of it. You still get to do that. And so by morphing into these worlds and being able to produce and direct films, it's stuff I love to do, because now you know enough to be able to, okay, what do I have to do to take this? You have to raise this money. You have to get that subject. You have to write that script. You have to build these things up to make them all work together as one, like the Long Live Rock turned out that way.
Yeah, well, documentaries are more of a labor of love than a business, correct?
Yeah, except that it's interesting because, like, you know, I want to make features. I like making features, but there's something to be said for having a set fan base. Like, there's hundreds of thousands of people like this music out there in the world. These festivals get anywhere from 60 to 70,000 people a day, right? And there's that many more that can't get to those festivals. But a movie like this, which kind of can give you a 101 overview of what's happening in the genre, there's a lot of people that can like this movie. And a lot of older friends have watched the movie and said, yeah, look, I knew nothing about this genre, or I looked at those people as freaks, but now I kind of have a better assessment of them. So it's kind of like the next one I'm doing is about the cosplay culture. And that's the same thing. Like, when I first went to Comic-Con, I produced a movie with Snoop Dogg. And I went there to go promo the movie, and I was like, wait, why are all these people dressed up like it's Halloween or Mardi Gras? Like, what's going on here? And then you realize it's this underground culture that over the last 10 years since that movie was made has become incredibly mainstream. So if you're Disney, Warner Brothers and you're releasing a superhero or a sci-fi movie, you got to go there and get these people's blessing. Like they need to give you the thumbs up, because if they throw a lot of shade and hate on you on the internet, they can ruin your opening weekend. So you have to pay respect to this Comic-Con culture. Same thing with this next movie where there's no Comic-Cons right now. So we have this incredibly vibrant film about this culture that we're going to put out in the summer, talking about what it's like. So again, I ended up doing these 2 subculture films in a row. I don't know why, it just kind of happened that way. But yeah, it's interesting to look at these different worlds where they don't get a lot of respect as people, for their craftsmanship or whatever it is. They get lumped in the category of, you know, why are these people dressing up? They're freaks. But the reality is it's nice to look into different subcultures.
Well, I went last year to my first Comic-Con, believe it or not, in San Diego with the Game of Thrones cast, and it was absolutely bonkers.
Well, that's like going into a show with the Rolling Stones, right? You're walking into a room with the hottest shit on the planet for not just like 1 year, but like 5-6 years, right? So you're building up this vested interest, and also the fact that Game of Thrones is coming to an end.
Right.
So in a way, you walked into something at its ultimate pop culture pinnacle, right? So that experience had to be insane.
It was nuts. It was literally like rock stars in the back way, out the side. But when I went the first day, everybody got there before me, and I actually had to walk through town and go in the front entrance and find a Warner Brothers booth. And I just walked around, and I'm like, wow, if I was like 16 in here, I would lose my shit.
Yeah, it's pretty crazy. You know, as a kid who grew up collecting comic books, you never think anything's going to get to that level. But anyway, so look, that will be coming this summer. But the Long Live Rock film is just it's an interesting look at this different culture and how this music fuels these people.
Yeah, well, I guess with no concerts or anything, it's a nice to look back and see what it was like. I mean, these guys are extreme. I mean, the moshing is extreme. I mean, I never really got into the mosh pit, but I'm like 6'4", and if I fell, I probably wouldn't be able to get up. But watching everybody run, like I've been at shows where they separate everybody. I believe that was in the movie too, and then everybody runs.
That's called the Wall of Death.
Oh my God.
And they use it as like, you know, it's an aggression. They get out their aggressions that way, and it's not meant to be violent. They're not meant to beat the fucking guys up next to you. It's just meant as this weird community, edgy thing. And if, you know, again, it's not for me and you. And that's what the beautiful thing about life, the different strokes for different folks.
Well, I just don't know, as guys get older too, how do you go and do that? Like in your 15?
I think it's a young man's sport. Like I look at it in a way, and you think about it, like think about football, right? Or rugby, or, you know, some of these heavy contact sports, right? You don't do those sports when you get old.
Right.
Like, you're done with
football. Tennis and golf.
Yeah, maybe you play college football if you get lucky, or whatever, or rugby or whatever. You play club or neighborhood pickup games, right? But the reality is you do that stuff when you're young. And the contact sports nature of that aggression, and you put some rock and roll to it in a way, that's what moshing really is. You know, being able to legally bounce off people and run at people full force, kind of what football is, right? In a way. And well, rugby definitely is. But so I think there's a little bit of contact sport element to it. And it's definitely a young man's sport. But I love the fact that women are out there mixing it up too. You know,
well, it's kind of crazy. And what's kind of crazy is now we're coming out of the coronavirus and COVID, and we're looking at shows, and every show I see has a pen or your own little sectioned off area, or you got to bring your car. What does this do for the whole vibe?
You know, look, it's a vibe killer. There's no doubt about it. I went to a couple shows this year. I went to Niederlander did a series of shows down at the Big A in Anaheim on the parking lot there. And I went to see, LP, and then I went to see Dawes. I see Jason Mraz is coming up soon. So I went to 2 of those shows. They did about 20 of them. But I think that it's weird, but it's also, you realize how much we took for granted. How much going to a restaurant, how much going to see live music, how much going to a movie theater. Like, these are things you're like, I'm not going to go out tonight and do that. You know, like, and now all you got to do is stay home, right? I'm going to stay home because I don't want to do that. And you realize how much you miss it. And that's what the movie kind of brings you back to. Like, oh yeah, I remember this. I want to do this again. I can't wait to do this. You know.
Who was one of your favorite interviews?
Well, look, some of my favorite artists, obviously, Tom Morello is one of the brightest, smartest guys, a Harvard graduate, and super cool, super insightful. He also was in a band with Chris Cornell. So I don't know if I told you the story, but like the day we went to the first day of interviews, it was going to be Lars into Chris Cornell. And at 6 o'clock that morning, I got a call from Gary saying Chris Cornell's dead.
Oh.
And he's like, I got to go into scramble mode and figure this out. You're kind of on your own today. I'll try to circle back with you, but the interviews are scheduled except for Chris, obviously. So as I go into the interviews, I'm like, well, I can't say, hey, man. And there was no thought in the movie it was supposed to be about drugs, alcohol, recovery, death. None of that was planned to be in the movie. And that's the cool thing about documentaries, because you can pivot. So I get to the venue, and I walk by, and there's Soundgarden's dressing room, and it says Soundgarden on the door still, like they hadn't taken the placard off. And you realize how fresh and raw it is. And then, so when I interview Lars, it's like, tell me about your thoughts about Chris Cornell. You can't start with, hey, man, isn't rock and roll so much fun? It's like literally 6 hours before that, people just found out Chris Cornell died. And then Tom Morello, same thing. So those two interviews, because they were very fresh, and the poignant nature of Lars and knowing Chris, and Tom obviously being in a band with Chris, those are powerful interviews because of that topic. And I, years ago when I was at A&M, I did the soundtrack world. I went up to flew up to Seattle with the movie Basketball Diaries, and I brought the movie Basketball Diaries up to show them with the music supervisor Karen Rackman, and they loved it, and they wrote a song for it, and that was like a beautiful moment to be able to pull that off. So I hadn't seen Chris in like 20 years. I was excited to see him again. But yeah, I mean, it's a crazy sport. There's no doubt about it.
So in the middle of making a documentary, all of a sudden you have all these side stories coming at you. How do you decide in the mix what stays, because you have so much stuff at your disposal there?
Yeah, it's frustrating, because I got to tell you, you put up this big whiteboard, and you put up all these different cards with different scenes and potential scenes. And because we hadn't, I planned to do a deeper dive into some of the fans' worlds, like Jessie, the girl who fishes and, carries the 45 while she fishes, and is a trauma nurse, and her father dies in Iraq, and her mother doesn't come back from, she's a drill sergeant and doesn't come back to take care of her. And, like these are, and Abby's story, the one-legged girl who loses her leg in a motorcycle crash, and first guy she meets has a chopper, and so it's like, these are like stories unto themselves that you could ride the whole thing on.
Right.
But then, if you have all these rock stars also, you have to make room for them. And then when I went up to San Francisco to Warfield to shoot Hailstorm, performing in an all-female rock tour with In This Moment and New Year's Day. And I'd never even seen anything like that. Females in rock are few and far between, but all of a sudden you realize this is a growing thing. And so there's like 70% women in the show, which I'd never seen before. And so like all these different things come at you, and it's very difficult to figure out, like, what do you give more emphasis to, and what do you give less emphasis to, and still make the movie move at 80 minutes. Cutting it down from 90 was tough, losing a lot of good stuff, but you don't want people to say it's slow. So you're kind of damned if you do and damned if you don't. The critics are like, oh, you try to pack too much in here. You didn't, it's like a TV, like a pilot for a TV series. And I'd love it to be a TV series, but it's a tough one, because the fans think it moves just right. It moves well. And the reviewers are like, yeah, it's not, you don't go enough you go too many places, in other words, so hard to do it all.
Yeah, I saw one of the big criticisms, the New York Times in their review, the lady was banging you up about heavy metal being too white.
Yeah, that's one of those. I couldn't really control that one. That's a tough one.
I mean, everything now is so razor edge when it comes to everything, race and feminism, and like everything is like, if you go one step this way, you're insulting. If you go one step this way, you're not paying enough attention. You're really riding a fine line.
And you realize when you make a movie, my mother used to say this, who was a novelist, writing writing a book, she say, and having children is like putting your heart on your sleeve, right? Because you got to put yourself out there. And a lot of the reviews, like I said, there's too much information, packing too much. That review was too many white people, and then you go down the road with using some African, talking about the African American and diversity in music, but you don't go there enough. So you're kind of damned if you do. And I can't control the fact that it's mostly a white sport. I can't control that. And that's not what a review should be to me. A review should be, okay, how could the movie be better? Having more white people is not something I could control.
Or more blacks. I mean,
less white people.
You can't really control who's in the movie or who likes that kind of music. I mean, I've seen white and black fans at all kinds of music, but you definitely see more at some music than other, right?
Yeah, correct. Country, you'll see a lot less African Americans or, Latinos, whatever. But, rap, you'll see it predominantly more. It's just the way life works, But again, when you make the movie, everybody's got something to say, and that's all you can do,
Yeah, and I'm sure you're second guessing yourself enough when you're a director.
Always, man. You're always like, oh, what if I made that segment longer? If I did put that. One guy, the CNN guy, was like, they really missed an opportunity to not have a postscript about COVID. I was like,
yeah, I read that too, and I'm like, come on.
I finished the movie a year ago, dude. So that it just didn't go back there.
And then what would your postscript be? I mean, what could you actually say about what's going on now that has any relevance?
Right, you show an empty stadium and say, hey, we all miss live music. What? And again, what that also does is it doesn't make the film timeless, right? Right now, the film has a timeless quality. You can watch this film in 20 years and still, wow, they had all these rock stars and, talking about this. I mean, you look at two of the only other really classic films about rock music were Heavy Metal Parking Lot, which is literally one dude in a Judas Priest parking lot, I think in Maryland at a concert, which is like 35, 40 years, which people still talk about. And the other is Penelope Spears' Decline of Western Civilization 2, which obviously she's a super real filmmaker. But my point was well, wait a second, there's so few movies made in this genre. If my movie could stand the test of time and live on like those movies, great. Because it is a sport that people transfer on to their sons and daughters. If you like that music, you'd like your kids to like it and transfer it on. We are lucky, Jeff, because we have this incredible love of festivals, right? And all our kids are now festival junkies like us, right? And that's a beautiful thing. And, one of the best experiences I've had in the last number of years going to festivals, and I've been to a lot, is Jeff's family, my family, and another good friends of ours family all went to Outside Lands together. And which is in San Francisco, which is a great festival, Golden Gate Park. And we all rented a place together. We had the greatest time. It's a great community building experience, no matter what kind of music you like.
And generational building, which I think is what you're talking about here.
Correct.
Right?
Yes.
It transfers over. The kids all want to go, like my kids. But as I told them, oh, look, Outside Lands is Halloween. We're going. Life is beautiful. We're going. Bonnaroo's Labor Day weekend. We're going, Dad. I mean, they want to go to everything that's out there,
Right.
I'm going to go broke this year.
Right. Yeah. And it's, it is a thing to figure out how to do it all. And you can't touch them all, but you want to, because it's so much fun. It's a great weekend. And you get to suck up all sorts of great music. And
it's something we've been missing, a big hole in our lives, the community, the sense of being together. And I just one of the question I asked you earlier was, how do we, if everybody's going to be in these sectioned off areas this year, how is that going to affect the mosh pit?
Good question. So you're talking about those festivals are going to have those pens?
No. I'm not talking about those festivals. Those festivals all been pushed to fall, thinking that they're going to get back to capacity. What I read today was a place like Red Rocks by July of this year, the state of Colorado said they're going to have 75 to 80% people inside Red Rocks. Red Rocks holds 9,000. That's probably around 7,000 people. Just doing the math off the top of my head that they're going to allow in. So, I mean, you're getting some big crowds. As far as Outside Lands, I'm sure that they're selling that out at capacity. Bonnaroo has already sold out. They rolled those tickets over a year and a half.
Right, because that already sold out for last year, right?
Yeah, they sold out last June, and then they postponed that to this June, and then they moved that recently till Labor Day. So, and we saw Coachella as punted till 2022 entirely. So, right. and to me, AEG has the space out there at the Polo Fields to do the sectioned off shows, or if they wanted to have 60,000 people out there and put everybody in a pod at the fairgrounds, they could probably do that.
Right.
They have enough room at the Empire Polo Fields, don't you think? If they wanted to do that, they could.
That's also, to me, about getting back on schedule. Like, think about the Jazz Fest moving to October, and their thing is in April. So that means in 4 months they have to do the next year's show again, right? So they have to literally go from that October show, it ends on October 18th, to the April 25th show, right? Like, that's pretty heavy.
That would be 6 months later, right? Within 6 months, you're doing another entire festival. Yeah. But you know the fans are going to come.
Absolutely. Yeah, I already booked my tickets for Jazz Fest in October. So, yeah, it's an interesting thing. And, doing a film about this culture is something I never planned to do. And then it just kind of happened. I mean, Gary and I were talking about it because I was kind of amazed at the fandom and just, why do people crowd surf? What makes them mosh? Like, that was really what my premise going in. And you end up a lot of different places in it. But you, because I've always loved going to music, and not till I went to some of Gary's festivals in Ohio to see the level of crowd surfing and what that does and moshing and the power of it. To me, it was something I wanted to dive a little deeper into. And that's what,
Well, the pits are definitely crazy. I remember when Rage Against the Machine played Coachella, the hype was unbelievable. And I remember this huge security guard I was talking to before the show. And he said to me, like, I've never seen a pit like it was for Rage. The kids were smashed together like I've never seen in my life. It was packed. And the security guard said to me, there's 70 SWAT officers backstage in full riot gear. And I was like, really? He goes, yeah, there's a lot of talk on the internet how everybody's going to bust the stage and storm the stage. And I was like, well, do me a favor. My back's going to be the audience. If they bust over the rope, we tap me on the shoulder. And the guy says, if you see the back of my head, you better follow me. So I was like, oh, shit.
It's funny about Rage because when they played the Democratic National Convention, the cops were on super high alert. And then that night, I want to say it was that night or whatever, there was a show at the El Rey. And it was one of those same things that I got the tip about. And basically cops stood at the front door, and even if you had tickets, they wouldn't let you in because Rage had said something about police brutality or whatever. And for some reason, because Zach is super political, and so is Tom for that matter, the cops and the Rage just like, so it's interesting you're talking about for that. I never heard that story you told me, but it doesn't surprise me.
Oh no, the hype for that Coachella set was unbelievable. It was one of the hardest tickets. I mean, Coachella is always a hard ticket, but especially that night and everybody on the fairgrounds. The electricity was something I'd never felt before at Coachella, and I've been shooting it for years.
Yeah, you go to a Rage show and that electricity is like nothing else because they just take it to 12 and just keep going, through the whole set.
Absolutely insane. The other time I shot them, which was some weird stuff happened, was they played the Velodrome with the Beastie Boys opening. And they had us all in the photo pit. And at one point, the crowd started rocking the photo pit. And security told us all to get up on stage, which has never happened to me in my 3 decades of shooting, where they come to you and they're like, you need to get on stage right now. And I remember getting up and pulling other photographers up. And I pulled one photographer up and I watched his leg come out of the pit just as the wall collapsed where his foot was a second later. Like, he would have lost his foot if I hadn't yanked him up out of there. And then the fans were right up against the stage. We shot the rest of our 2 songs in front of the bass amps for the Beastie Boys. And then later that night, I stuck around for Rage, but they didn't even let us close to the stage. I got barely any photographs that night. But they were one of those kind of bands that lit everybody up and lit up, and they still do.
Yeah. Jeff, let me ask you a question about the 2 songs thing. So, you see for the beginning of the set, the photographers come into the pit and then 2 songs out they go. Has that always been a thing? And some bands
go ahead.
And do some bands not do that? What's the percentage of bands that say 2 songs and out?
It's 3 songs officially is what they usually say. Okay. And if you're dealing with a band like the Grateful Dead or Fish, though that it might play a 40-minute song to open, they'll say you get 15 minutes. And I've also shot Britney Spears. I know you work with Britney many times where they stood in front of me with a stopwatch and said, you have 90 seconds. So you have all kinds of range in there. The original rule started because in the first 15 minutes, The artist is composed. They're all dressed. Their hair's done. Their makeup's done. They look perfect. And they want those images to go out of everybody looking perfect. But let's face it, the best pictures happen in the last 20 minutes of the set every time, because that's when they're playing their hits. That's when they're giving it all. So you want to be in there for the end. So there are very few bands now that allow photographers to stay. In the old days, if I would get a photo pass to shoot the Rolling Stones, I'd be one of 20 photographers allowed in for 15 minutes to go shoot the Rolling Stones. And after 15 minutes, I would be walked out, and I would leave 60,000 people in that venue without a camera. As you know, everybody has a camera now. So when I leave now and I have those first 3 songs in my camera, everybody's still there shooting for the whole show. If somebody falls or something happens or there's a guest that pops up, somebody else is going to have the picture and have the video. So there has been talk about getting rid of the 3-song rule, at least before pandemic, because what's the difference? Every camera's in there. Some of the biggest publicists in the business have told me that. But now with COVID, I don't know what's going to happen when we get back to this. And, to be honest, John, there was a time when it was important to have a photographer in there. Now the fans are doing all the lifting for you. They're doing all the heavy.
Let's talk about that for a second. And not that I want to interview you, but I always
go for it.
I'm fascinated by this shit. So 2 things come to mind. So you guys will sometimes have a relationship with a band, like, Kevin, right? Will have a relationship with a band and he'll be able to stay in for the whole thing, right? Or you'll be able to stay in for the whole thing.
Right.
This way the band can look at those photos first, right? Before they go out. And they can say, that one's cool. I'm good with you letting those out, right?
Right.
How often does that happen that the band has their own guy?
Oh, the band always has their own guy. And one thing I saw, which was really interesting once we started going digital, so I remember shooting the Black Eyed Peas, and I looked down, and there was their manager with a nice $5,000 Canon shooting right next to me. And I'm like, what are you doing? He goes, I was paying you guys $3,000 a night. Now I just bought my own camera, and you guys are out of the equation. And I'm like, oh.
That brings up my next question. Obviously, you and I have talked about this, that everybody has a camera now, and pictures are not what they used to be. So what does that business look like for you now in the future?
Well, that's a really good question. I really don't know, because this has been the most I haven't shot or been involved or been in the game since I moved here. It's been a nonstop snowball since I got here, just kind of like you. You just start on a path and it keeps growing and growing and growing. And I didn't really know which way it was going. As it grew, I'm just like, okay, where is this going to go? What is it that I want to be? And everything kind of revealed itself to me in time. And I was like, okay, here I am. I'm the guy that has this access in these relationships. So I don't know. I don't know what's going to happen in the future. I wish I did. I mean, I was talking to a friend of mine today. I was like, I'm 58 and I'll be 59 in a couple months. And I'm like, another 6 months, I can start taking retirement.
Yeah, but did you have your clients, like you get the HBOs of the world, or people that hire you to do their parties and their stuff? They're always going to do that. So those gigs are super important. But whereas the concert photography stuff is not like it used to be.
Right. Well, you know what? I realized a long time ago that the money wasn't into shooting the concert photography, that it wasn't doing the celebrity events and working with HBO and shooting all the award shows was really what people had the thirst for. The rock concerts and the festivals, I got into that mostly because it was fun and it was different. And I wasn't on a red carpet trying to shoot some posed photo. You were actually in a real moment. The one beautiful thing about live music, as you know, is it's very genuine. Even if the guy's going out there every night and doing the same exact show, they connect. There's a connection. And with celebrity culture, it's just such bullshit that I really had a hard time, and I still have a hard time dealing with it and the contrived nature of it. And the prepackaged nature of it. The thing I like about rock and roll is it flies, and you're going to get an image that you would never get. I mean, I've seen things in my camera that I look down and I'm like, oh my God, this is absolutely incredible. And it even blows me away, because you just can't believe that you're that in the moment and that in the pocket and that focused on what you're doing to be able to let the creativity fly like that. So I really appreciate the way my photographs look so much more amazing. I mean, the picture over my shoulder here, I mean, that's, a live
I was in that crowd right near that guy. And when he got passed up, that was a beautiful moment. Like, they literally passed that guy to the stage, right?
Yeah, he got past the stage, and then he sat up there for the rest of the set.
What band was that again?
That was Young the Giant, and the song was Right Body.
Yeah. Yeah, that was a beautiful moment. And, I flash back to that when I met Abby and I watched her, the one-legged gal in my
Yeah,
movie.
because you have a wheelchair scene in the film.
Yeah, she could be her own movie. Like, she's just an incredible character who is trying to get other disabilities wheelchair crowd surfing going, because she relishes that moment of getting up there, and it's just, she loves the attention and just loves the attitude of it, and it's a beautiful thing to see disability, people with disabilities doing stuff that people think they shouldn't be doing, and they just say, "Fuck it, we love it."
Well, I know healthy people that won't get up and crowd surf.
I'm not going up. Again, the older you get, the more, I don't know, wise or conservative or less balls, however you want to slice it, to do the things that people when you're younger, you do it. So it's an interesting conundrum. But
well, I find myself trying to take care of myself as I get older rather than put myself in danger.
Yeah, exactly. And rock and roll, it can be a dangerous game. It's a lot of fucking banging into each other.
Yeah, a lot of banging into each other and a lot of raging. I mean, that's the one thing I miss, is just being out there, the wild abandon, and not being afraid of your neighbor, and just being able to go for it, and being able to pass a joint, and being able to, hug people and share a drink, and, all this kind of stuff. Everybody's going to look at you a little bit sideways when you're like, hey, have some of this. It's like
passing a joint is like taboo. You know what I mean? It's just not going to be a thing. And, even hugging people is like weird.
Yeah, well, we're definitely in there. I mean, I've had a couple weeks away, and I will say that, from what I've seen, we are going to get back to it. It's coming back. It's all going to come back. It's just a question of when. I mean, the vaccination news is good. I mean, I'm looking forward to moving on. So you got cosplay coming up next. You got something else on the horizon you're thinking of?
I'm doing a film with the city of Louisville, who, I don't know if you know that Muhammad Ali was born in Louisville, Kentucky, and was laid to rest there 5 years ago. This June is his 5th year anniversary of his death. So I worked with them to create a film about Muhammad's upbringing and his passing, and his coming of age there. He was, I don't know if you know the story, but when he was 12, I think his bike got stolen, and he was looking for a cop to try to help someone find his bike, and he ran into this guy named Joe Morton, I think his name was Joe something. Anyway, and Joe was like, he goes, I'm gonna crush that guy when I find him. And he goes, do you know how to fight? And he's like, no. He goes, well, come with me. And and again, I don't know what's legend or what's real, but he takes him down to a gym that he's running where black kids are hitting white kids and vice versa. And Muhammad's like, well, Cassius Clay at the time is like, wait a second. So black kids can hit white kids legally? He's like, yeah. And so that's how he started boxing. This guy, Joe, set him up. Who was a cop, and he set him up at this gym he had, and that's how he started to box. And then the Louisville, then he got into the Olympics, and he went to the Olympics and he won. And in that interim, this group called the Louisville Sponsoring Committee, basically all these business owners, came together to fund him so he didn't end up in like mafia hands, which is what happened to a lot of boxers, because they had disposable income, shall we say, and wanted to own a piece of the gate. And that's how Muhammad started. He was back by his hometown and never forgot them. Always went back, opened up this beautiful museum called the Ali Center, which I would second it only to the Grammy Museum as far as like a really fun center for culture and a museum for Muhammad. So that's going to be coming out this summer. So yeah, from nothing, I'll have 3 movies coming out in 1 year,
Wow.
Crazy.
Absolutely incredible. You mentioned the Grammys. You were a big part of the Grammys for decades, working on that show and working with the Grammy organization. What did you think about the latest effort?
Well, I thought that, they did a really nice job utilizing space that they had and keeping it intimate. And, the toughest part of that show is intimacy, right? That's a show that could sell out the Rose Bowl. It sells out the Staples Center every year. You can't, even your members who were like myself, you got to basically have angles to get tickets, right? And so how do you keep those live shows of 20,000 people intimate? Well, here you didn't have to worry about that. Basically, you just had a bunch of great bands perform. You had a stud like Trevor Noah, who nobody doesn't like. He appeals to everybody. He's funny. He's just a great host. And you put it in an intimate setting. And it was I thought it was a home run. So,
yeah, but unfortunately, the ratings suck. They got 55% less people tuning in this year. And, as far as I see, these award shows are dead in the water. I mean, nobody gives a shit anymore.
Yeah, think about it. Okay, I said to my daughter, Eliza, did you watch the Grammys? She goes, Dad, I don't have a TV. And if I had a TV, would I watch network TV? So the reality is what's dead is network TV for younger people, right? Because they only know words like Netflix, Hulu, Amazon, Spotify, right? That world is gone. So the idea that those network TV shows are going to have huge numbers anymore, I just don't see it ever happening.
But do you think that the numbers would have been better on YouTube?
Well, I think what's going to happen is, because if you noticed CBS and Viacom promoting their new Paramount Plus streaming network, I think you've got to have that show next year on Paramount Plus at the same exact time it's on CBS, because that's where you're going to get viewers from, and they're going to build that up over the years and use Paramount Plus as your streamer platform, because CBS is just not cool no matter how you slice it. And so I think that the idea that network TV ratings are going to be great anymore, I think it's moved on, man. I think that train left the station.
Well, it's not even anymore the show itself. It's that viral moment that you see the next day that's all over Twitter about something that happened on the show. That's really what gets everybody's interest now, is kind of the social implications behind it, the show, more than the show, because nobody has a 3-hour attention span anymore. Nobody wants to sit there and watch guys in tuxedos come up for sound editing, and as important as they are. This goes for the Oscars, it goes for the Emmys, it goes for the Grammys, it goes for the Golden Globes, all of them. I mean, this is an antiquated way of entertaining people that networks use as their tent poles to get big advertisers. And over the years, they had big ratings, and now it's all kind of falling apart. But they're still trying to cling to it as if it's savior.
Like the record business. The record business did not want to walk away from the CD model. The CD model was you could sell a piece of plastic for $15. It costs you $1 to make, and you have royalties for another couple bucks, and then all that money would go to a label. And so why would you ever want to walk away from that model? But at a certain point, they had a gun to their head that Napster came along and sucked them up, and then the people had to move into streaming, even though streaming's a terrible business for.
Well, streaming's a terrible business, but the music business definitely blew it right there with Napster. When they should have embraced that technology, they tried to make it illegal and then make it go away, and then it just came back even stronger a couple years later.
Yeah, and you realize you can't argue with technology. When a good technology comes along, you cannot put your head in the sand and try to ignore it, even though your business model will never be as good. There was no way that, if you could clear $5-7 on a CD, whatever per thing, versus what it is to sell a track on, or have a part of selling, a download or even a piece of streaming business model will never be as good. But there's more people than ever consuming music right now, and that's a beautiful thing.
Yeah, but the money's not going down to the artists. The companies like Spotify are making all the cash, and then they're not paying out anybody. When you look at the average amount that these artists are making, it's embarrassing. I don't know how you survive, especially with no touring. I mean, because all the bands now make their money on touring. So until we're back at it.
Rough year for the music, live music sense and everyone. But, I think that people have been, if you notice, the business this year, 2020, was only off slightly as far as what the business generates in its income. And that's because streaming was so important to the game, and there's so many people consuming music and getting into the streaming platforms.
Yeah, and that's all we had really was streaming when we were all sitting there by ourselves, be able to stream a show or stream a song and send it to your friends. I mean, it's really what kept us connected for the past year, I guess, is really music.
Yeah, absolutely.
And television.
Yeah, a lot of people watching a lot of shows on TV.
What do you think the future is going to hold? When do you think we're going to get back to it? Do you think that these guys are on point by kicking everything to the fall?
I mean, absolutely. I mean, I think that the percentage of the way vaccinations are rolling is very
3 million this weekend, by the way.
Yeah, and I think that New York just moved the age down to 50, which means that LA or the West Coast will move to 60 soon, and then 60, lower. And I think that it's a great thing. It worries me that you still find the Trump people of the world, 40% of people don't want to get vaccinated or something like that, something ridiculous like that. And what that does is that just says, oh, America is definitely not together. Because if there's still that many people out there. Or this girl, in one of my classes, I teach an American. She lives in Alabama, and I was asking her about it. She goes, "Well, most of the people who go to Auburn, where I live, they already had COVID, so they feel like they're invincible, like they don't need a vaccine." Like, wow, that's an interesting way to look at life, and that's what happens when you're young. Young and invincible. So what? I get COVID. I'm down for 2 weeks. I'm back up. I'll never get it again. I don't need it. So it's just a weird thing. And I don't know. I mean, look, you look at that picture over your shoulder, and the question is, and you look at my movie, and there's 60,000 people standing shoulder to shoulder, fist in the air, spitting, singing the lyrics, right? Spitting at each other. Are people going to be comfortable with that in the fall? I don't know.
I don't know. Obviously, because they're all selling out. So people can't wait to get back to it. And, like I said, like you were talking a little bit about the rumpy there, but, it was a lack of leadership from the beginning that put us in the situation we're in now, where if we would have had some concrete, direction and, we would have had some kind of COVID plan, we would probably be feeling a lot better where we are. But I think it's the unknown, this great unknown that we have refused to wrap our heads around the past year. But we're just lucky that in the 1 year, they got a vaccination for us, and that we're going to be able to get back at it. So
yeah,
I'm hopeful.
Right. Anyway, so the movie, longliverock.com.
Yeah, tell people how they can watch it.
Yeah, so you just go to longliverock.com movie. I'm sorry, longliverock.com movie, longliverockmovie.com. I'm sorry. And basically, there's a way you can go through your favorite band, or you can just go virtual cinema and pick a theater that you want to support, because obviously cinemas, talk about a business that just got murdered. They was already having problems anyway with the streamers coming out with closing the windows of how long you can have to watch a film in theaters before you go to streaming. So theaters have gotten crushed. So you can support a theater or support one of your local, one of the bands that are participating, and just watch the movie there. And like I said, if you like rock music on any level, I think you'll like this movie. So go take it.
Well done, John. Congratulations on finishing a documentary. I know how hard it is, and I know how hard you work at it. And we look forward to the cosplay and to the Ali doc. It's going to be a lot of fun. Jonathan McHugh, ladies and gentlemen.
Thank you, Jeffrey. Always a pleasure until we can party again, my friend.
All right. Well, love to the family, and I'm sure I'll see them all, and I'll see you soon. Looking forward to getting back to our shenanigans. And, I'm actually thinking about going to Jazz Fest the end of April, beginning of May, just because I kind of want to be there.
Well, no, Jazz Fest is October 8th, bro.
No, I'm just talking pretending that it's happening now and going down to New Orleans.
Oh, you mean like next couple weeks?
Yeah, like at the end of April.
Coachella would be weeks away. My wife would be heading out to the desert for like a month to work at Coachella and Stagecoach.
Well, here Jim Brock has a quick question. Why did Coachella pull the plug, but others go forth? I think, I talked to some of the people from AEG, and they're like, Phil Anschutz does not need the money, is what someone told me. So he's like, fuck it, we're just going to wait.
Yeah, it's an interesting one because they probably could get away with it. Yeah, I mean, I don't know. 2 years of no Coachella, it's pretty heavy.
Yeah, it is. And, it's interesting. Our whole life is kind of heavy.
Yeah.
I'm ready for some fun, John.
I know, man. Me and you too. Me and you, buddy. We'll get back to it.
Looking forward to it.
Yeah, brother. Appreciate it.
Thank you, John McHugh.
All right,
Take
guys.
it easy. All right, Jonathan McHugh, our guest today. Wow, that went fast. Really fast. Thank you all for tuning in. Yes, John Lamb, the McLambitz family, the Lambs, the Kravitzes, and McHughes. That's a combination of all three of our names. We travel. The kids have been friends since they're this big. And we'll be at it. We're all going to be at it soon enough. All right. Tomorrow, Quentin Schaefer, HBO's old head of publicity, now an author, enjoying his retirement years after 40 years at HBO. Looking forward to talking to Quentin. You could tune in tomorrow at 4:20 p.m. Pacific time. Yes, if you notice, we're back in my favorite time zone here. It's nice and light out again. I'm happy. Spring is sprung. I'm ready. I'm ready to get at it. I'm ready to get out. This weekend, I had a triple hernia operation, which I'm recovering from. I did that Friday morning. And thank you, Matt Lublin, my doctor, for an amazing job, and Dr. Chang for the amazing job as anesthetic, because I really didn't feel a thing. I just was like, well, this is the operating room. And then I'm up. So I'm off the pain meds, ready to rock, We are ready. More 420 Live coming at you, folks. Have a great night, everybody. We will see you tomorrow. Jeff Kravitz